Well, a very warm welcome and good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us for the PitchMark IP Clinic with me, Mark Laudi, coming to you live here on Facebook from Singapore. Today, narratives in game design. How to design a game in such a way that you've got your users hooked as they pursue the story from start to finish. Our special guest joining us live from Guangzhou is gaming identity Kelly Bender. And also Frank Rittman is with us again, our legal advisor here at PitchMark.
Can I go to the other room?
Now, what you can see here on the screen share is our QR code. Please join us in our conversation. Just snap it with your phone. There's already a question for you to answer on the other side of it. So please let us know what sort of creative industry you are currently engaged in. And we'll see also that we can pose your questions to Kelly. You can add your questions through Menti. Once again, the QR code is on your screen. Well, our special guest today actually started his career in childcare education. He was initially training to help kids aged 5 to 12 overcome bullying. And as years wore on, he certainly seems to have put that skill to good use as he's ventured deeper into game design. Assassin's Creed is one of the games that he has to his credentials. And Kelly is, in fact, known from a variety of other game design studios where he has contributed most actively to some of the biggest titles in the business. Kelly looks like he's found a new perch there at his office in Guangzhou. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me. Yeah, sorry, I got kicked out of that meeting room, found another one.
All good. Anyway, it's great to have you with us, especially when we see such a remarkable profile over the last 20, 25 years in terms of game design. The cutting edge of game design these days, though, seems to be very much around not the version 1.0 of Pac-Man and Tetris, but very much into narration. What can our creative audience learn from that today, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is that most games weren't designed. They were actually designed just by programmers. So they were just programming it, and there was no need for a story. They were just pieces that were moving on the screen. And then as time has moved on, the demand for narrative has actually come from the audience themselves and the players themselves. And so that's why you're finding more and more narrative, and that's why you're finding more open world. You're finding more branching stuff where people have choices, people have decisions they have to make, and the characters and that they're interacting with, the NPCs, the non-playable characters, they're becoming more real, and players want that.
So how have you combined your love for writing stories and with your love for games? How did the two fit together?
I mean, I was very fortunate and very lucky I got in the gaming industry the same way everybody else does, and the love it's by luck. I just happened to be, so I started as you said, as a childcare worker. Then I transitioned to a stay-at-home dad, and then from that I started writing, and they started publishing me, and I started writing independent comic books. And then that kept on doing that. I was doing that all the way through. And eventually I got very fortunate to meet the people at Ubisoft in Singapore, and went for a job interview, did a writer's test, got hired almost immediately. And I was very fortunate enough to work on Assassin's Creed. And that's where my career started. But the comic books really helped me in the video game industry because there's a lot of similarities. So one, you're working on with a team. So that's a very huge thing where it's a team dynamic where everybody has input, everybody has a say, everybody has their own specific skill sets that you're working with. But there's also the limitations of the panel and the screen, right? So the players aren't looking to read a novel or play a novel; they're looking to play a story, and so we have to give them short, brief text that details it, and then get them moving on.
Now, before I invite Frank to also jump in, what I find really interesting about your story and how you're talking about games and narratives and stories in games is the wide application actually in many other industries. For example, here on the screen, you'll be able to see the types of industries that our viewers today are coming from. speeches, presentations, graphic design, copywriting, maybe even analyst slides. Surprise us, Kelly. How does narration and game design fit into these various other creative pursuits?
I mean, it's all about storytelling and how you present it, right? So even if you're telling a news story, you want to tell it in a certain way that you actually draw the audience in. You want I don't have to tell you guys how you guys do your job, but to the viewers at home, it's you guys use the inverted, you guys use the triangle where you get the most information at the top, and then you filter out the irrelevant information down below. Where in storytelling, you do the inverted triangle, where we actually want to give a lot of details, and then eventually we get to the point. But yeah, telling a story is a skill set to have, and it goes through business. So whether you're doing an email or presentation in your company, you want to be able to present it in a way that it's very clear, that the objectives are very clear, and that the person who you're describing it to has an interest in it.
And I guess, Frank, that goes for lawyers too, right? I mean, in a sense, you're also telling a narrative, you're forming a narrative for the judge.
Yeah, I think with respect to Kelly's point, the more you develop your expression, the more details you get. It becomes your story versus just simply facts. Romeo and Juliet is a love story that's been told time and time again, and it can be told with different degrees of expression and detail. And each time it's retold, that particular retelling becomes a copyrighted property.
So
the more you delve away from bare facts and into detailed expression, the better position you are to have a protectable work and something that you could possibly monetize.
Right.
And it's also important to point out that those are public domain characters as well. So I don't want people don't start doing that with Avenger characters.
Yes, I think the copyright expired on Romeo and Juliet a couple of centuries ago, quite possibly. But Frank, any point that you want to make to Kelly just at this time?
No, I'm just interested to hear more about the stories. I've got a lot of his experience. I've got a lot of stories about the way, questions along the way about the kinds of experiences Kelly has had. Maybe he's had his works used without his permission or consent, and what's been the facts behind those, and what's he done about it.
I do have a few of those stories.
Yeah, what happened?
So early on, when I was first started publishing comic books, I was looking. I wrote a story, was looking for a publisher to publish it. There's the major ones, but obviously you can't pitch to DC and Marvel because they create their own stories. But then there is other independent publishers of different levels of experience and all that. And I ended up got rejected by the top ones, and then ended up pitching it to. I'm not going to name the name of the company, but they pitched it to a company out of New York, just a small, transmedia company where they do, like web shows. They also do comic books and novels and stuff like that. And anyway, so long story short, I submitted it to them. I read the contract, let my lawyer friend read over the contract. He said, "Yeah, it looks great." I'm like, "Okay, good." Started working with the guy. About a month later, he sends me an email saying that I forgot to initial one of the pages of my contract. And so he's like, I'll resend the contract to you, just initial everything and send it back and everything's fine. So I'm like, I go over the contract, I send it out, in my filing cabinet right beside my desk. So I look at the contract, I'm like, no, I've initialed every page. And then I check the email and I realized that there was a new page added to the contract. And that new page basically said, I sign over all rights of this project to that publisher, to that company. And I'm like, wait a minute. So anyway, so I give it to my lawyer friend. Am I reading this wrong? He goes, no, you read it right. And so what I did is I ended up I ended up replying to the company with the email, and then I added my lawyer friend to it, and to the thread, and then it was a weird back and forth of ping pong where the company would email me back, but then they kept on adding like the new person, like he'd added their lawyer, then he added like the financial guy, then he added another guy, and then every time I replied all, I'd include my lawyer and I'd reply all. all these other email addresses kept on bouncing because they were fake. And so it was a crazy situation where, yeah, it turned out, so obviously we said, okay, you know, my lawyer's like, we can take this into court, or we can just null the contract and walk away and leave it as it is. And that's what we ended up doing, is we just basically killed that contract. Of course, the book was already started. So I had to, like, you know, talk to the team and find a new publisher. And fortunate enough, I was finding a new publisher with it that actually was honest and decent. But you run into people, and sometimes mistakes are made, and sometimes experiences are made as well.
Wow. So that was a situation where they were essentially presenting to you a contractual dispute, but they'd already gone ahead and published the work.
They were presenting me that they were basically trying to steal my work by me signing it off to them, claiming that I failed to sign their contract properly. And fortunate enough that I did just quickly sign it, and I actually, you know, took my time, read the contract, and compared the two, and luckily was able to get out of a bad situation.
Yeah, it sounds like a good thing that you did. Jesus, it just sounds horrible.
It's extraordinary. Hang on a minute, Frank. Isn't this? I mean, it's Frank. It's one thing to kind of surreptitiously borrow somebody's idea, but quite another.
I thought was gonna. That's what I thought was going to
fraud?
happen. I was curious to hear more about that story. Like maybe you submitted something and they said, "Well, we're not interested," and maybe you found it used. But this sounds just terrible. Really egregious.
Yeah, no, it was very tough, like, especially when I was starting out, right? Like that was my second published accepted book, I guess I should say, my second accepted book by a publisher, and so I thought it's all going to be like this. And I had another issue where I did work and was contracted to do work, and the publisher ended up not paying me, and then it ended up not paying like everybody. And then there was a big issue with that as well. So yeah, like you've had experiences and stuff like that, but I mean, it hasn't dissuaded me from following my dream and my passion, but it also lets me, you know, big thing is read the contract, have a lawyer go over the contract, have a lawyer explain to you the contract, and what your legal rights are, and basically what you're signing. That's the biggest thing.
What did you do in this particular case? Oh, sorry, Frank, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, when you communicate with publishers, are you typically submitting something to them on their own initiative, or are you responding to a request that they might have made for ideas?
Yeah, no, it's all self-driven. So basically you go to the website. So this is like whether you're publishing a children's book, a comic book, a novel, same thing. You just go to these, you just find all these publishers that are accepting submissions. Then you read their guidelines, and then you submit it. And then if they're interested in it, they follow up with you. So all you're doing is it that way. I've had, like, there's some publishers out there that I wouldn't call it shady. I just call it not the best business practice, where literally, like, you have to pay them to publish your book. And that's, I've seen that where you literally have to upfront essentially the first printing cost of the book, and then you make your money back over time through that, but then they distribute it through their channels. I wouldn't recommend that for people. I mean, this shouldn't be a major cost. And it definitely shouldn't be a detriment to your family if you have a family, or anything like that. Like, don't mortgage your house for this. Do it smart that way. But know that there's ways to build a career, especially in the writing industry, without being published. So because you can self-publish, you can have a blog, you can digital publish. I self-publish myself now in China because I honestly don't have time to come up with new stuff that's not, you know, work related or that's game related. So if I wanted, so for example, I did a children's book last year that I self-published. I did submit it to publishers, and only heard back from a couple. But that's where I rated that one, where it's like, oh yeah, we'll publish your book, but you have to pay, you know, X number of dollars up front for the first print run. And I'm like, isn't that your guys' job? But it's just that's their model, is they do it that way, and then they hope it works.
Yeah. Viewer question, Kelly, the question from one of you watching, thank you for submitting this one here on Menti. Is this publisher that you referred to earlier still in business, the one who sent you the contract and inserted some pages? You go on to say, this story sounds like the Tetris backstory. Do you know what that's referring to?
I do know what they're referring to, and it is a bit like that. The Tetris backstory, and actually there's a really good movie that just came out about the Tetris backstory, but obviously it's Hollywoodized but it's a really good movie and I do recommend it. But yeah, truth be told, this publisher is still there. In fact, I came across them. LinkedIn actually recommended me to connect with them like about a month ago. And I'm like, oh, no, thank you. But yeah, so they still are there. Are they still doing the same shady stuff? The answer is I don't know. I don't have any dealings with them. I would like to think that they, something happened and maybe they did it in a lawsuit or maybe who knows what happened. But I had another issue actually where I did an online talk. So I do talks, presentations, master classes, if you will, on game design and I ended up doing a game design talk. It actually ended up being recorded without my permission. And there was actually shown via a Facebook page where you can actually sign up to this class and pay for this master class by me. And all it was a recording of a class that I did that I was paid to do the class, but in the contract and I stipulated in the contract that it is not recorded and nothing in the class sheet couldn't be used without my permission or compensation. And so that I made sure that was in the contract. But that's just once again something I learned over time to include in contracts. But yeah, anyway, they ended up doing that, and I ended up having to sue them. And we were gonna like take to court, and they ended up paying monetary fee to compensate me for that, and then they ended up taking it down. So and it actually hurt their reputation. Once again, I'm not gonna say who that is as well because we're not in the slander business. But yeah, just you have to just be careful. Make sure once again when you're doing contracts, what's involved. Like what is your obligation, and make sure that you meet your obligation and stick to your obligation.
So in that earlier story, what was the resolution in the end? Did your lawyer friend then ring this company and say, what are you guys doing inserting unsigned pages into the contract? Or, I mean, did you get any money out of it at all? How was it resolved?
We got no money. I didn't lose money either, which is good. So it was one of those things where what we did, we just went to that email thing where everything kept bouncing back, and they were all fake emails. And we basically just said, look, at the end of the day, it's an independent comic book. It's not worth money. It's definitely not as worth as much money as it would cost to do the lawyer fees and all that, right? And go to court. I was in Canada at the time. They were in New York. So we just said, let's just kill let's kill the contract. So the lawyer basically just said, they just did a cease contract letter. I can't remember what the term is. Frank would know what they're called, and basically just amicably walked away from everything and went from there. I did hear other people have dealings with this company. And if they asked me privately, I would say, hey, yeah, just read your contract, be careful. This is what happened to me. But I didn't go online, I didn't blast them, I guess is the best way to put it. But that's just not who I am, and that's the way I've based my career and built my personal brand around, is that I just, I don't want to be that negative person but that being said, I will air caution and come online and, have these stories and just have people be aware of things.
Well, Frank, isn't that the place where we head from the gray areas between trademark, patent, and copyright law into the gray areas of defamation? Clearly, if going by Kelly's experience, gosh, I would certainly appreciate being forewarned before you kind of do a deal with somebody like that. On the other hand, are you allowed to go around and say, hey, these guys almost try to rip me off?
Well, you've got to be careful. The answer is going to be it depends where you are and what you're saying. In terms of defamation, the world is such a small place that it's surprising that this company would act so egregiously, because people do talk, and especially on social media. Generally speaking, however, facts are a defense to defamation. So if what Kelly said is in fact true, by telling the world what happened, no, he's not putting himself at risk in too many places for defaming them or harming their reputation.
Awesome. Incidentally, for you watching us on Facebook Live, if you're an innovator, you're registered for free with PitchMark you're also very welcome to tell us actually who the good guys are. We don't celebrate them enough. Which of the companies or clients that you have do you get the greatest sense of confidence that they respect your IP? We'd also like to hear from you. Another call for you to add your questions, comments, or other contributions. Kelly Bender is here for another 20 minutes to answer them. This is the next question we're asking you. Have you had clients or prospects steal your ideas in the past? 2 of you have voted already, and here is the QR code. I guess, Kelly, everybody has a story to tell. Sounds like, though, because you've been in the creative industries for a long time in your professional career, from writing to game design and so on, that you probably have these experiences all the time.
We have a lot of experiences where, especially with art vendors, to be honest with you, in the video game industry, is that a lot of times we outsource our art, or even with AI art that we use, that sometimes you get stuff that comes back that looks too similar to something else. So that's where we have to watch out, where you have to really watch your vendors, especially when you're doing some of the art vendors that we use from other countries. They work on a fast get it done model, where I've actually caught it where they really gave us a character that was the exact same as another character from another video game, and all they did was just change the color of his outfit, but it clearly was just the exact same character. I've also found that we've had celebrities in our games that was not was not used with their permission either. So it's like, okay, why is this celebrity in our game? We can't do that. So there's a lot of things that way. Luckily, I've worked on a lot of with a lot of great companies, so it's not as prevalent. But you have to be careful, especially with your work with IPs, right? So IPs is where it gets really tricky, is that they have their own branding model and their own guidelines that you have to follow. So they protect their brands very, very well. Disney's probably the best at it. And they're a great company, and you get to work on a great brand, but it is one of the more tough brands to work with because of their guidelines and the way they protect their brands.
You would think that the game designers themselves, being in the IP business, would have greater respect for other people and their IP.
You've never worked with an IP and you've never had to deal with those brand guidelines. A lot of times you're just used to doing it yourself, right? And that's the thing, is that if you're just used to being your own boss or your own designer, you're not thinking about these things, right? I was taught very early on in my career to treat every book like it was Star Wars, because the only way there's going to be a problem with it and a lawsuit with it is if it is Star Wars. You know, like if you're just doing an indie book, or you're doing an indie band, and you don't have your contracts properly drawn out and submitted, then you will run into issues later if it becomes something major, right? So yeah, so you just got to protect yourself early on to make sure that you're doing it right. But sometimes people are just heavily influenced by something. Some people just don't care. But that separates the professionals from the non-professionals, in my opinion.
Frank, did you find this in the movie business too, when you were the policeman for the studios pursuing pirated movies? Did you find that the studios were more respecting of IP?
They're more careful. Typically, the guys that I was representing have huge insurance backers who will go through scripts, and at the first sign of somebody else's material being used, they're going to want to do due diligence and get written assurances and representations and warranties. And if there's so much of a music lyric line from a song that they're not 100% certain that isn't nailed down, they're probably going to err on the side of caution and take it out. Having said that, mistakes do get made from time to time, and this is the stuff that we read about in our stories.
Yes. Speaking of what we're reading about, Kelly, you probably are all across the Super Mario movies. Here is the story on the BBC website. It says, Super Mario movie sensational box office takings defy poor reviews. As you're talking about narratives, brands, games, can we say that that there is, so to speak, safety in numbers, that the bigger the franchise is that you manage to build, that the less likely people think they can take a chance and take you on?
Oh, of course, yeah, but I mean, you got to get there first, and that's the biggest thing. So the first thing you have to do is you have to build that brand, and that starts with an original idea, and that's where it starts is an original idea, an original concept, and then you build it from there. And that to me that comes from narrative. Now, obviously, if you're building a shoe company or fashion design, that's a little different. But your narrative and your story will be your branding design template and the way that everything in your company will look like it came from that company. And to me, that's your own identity brand. So you start as what is the initial IP, then you build it. It's just gotta everybody's gotta be on board. It's basically like you're trying to win the championship. It's a team sport where everybody has to be on the same page. You're working together towards a goal. You create this brand, you put it out in the world, and then you hope it resonates with the people. So obviously, when it comes to video games, yes, you're gonna have cool art. Yes, you can have cool characters, but the gameplay has to be fun. And so if the gameplay is not fun, it doesn't work. And that's the thing. So you can have a brand, and it can be very successful, and it can go long term, and you can have somebody like Mayer who's been in hundreds of different games, and he's been everything from Olympic athlete to a doctor to a professional golfer or tennis player, right? Because of the game mechanics. But then you can have another company like Rovio with Angry Birds, who they seem to only get their success from that same type of gameplay mechanic where they tried to put it in other ways and they tried to do RPG, match three, and it just doesn't resonate the same as the original gameplay does. But then that being said, Angry Birds is another cross-media, multi-platform storytelling powerhouse for them because it's in movies, it's in web series, it's in comic books, it's on branding, it's on merchandising. So they have done all that. But then yes, of course, the bigger you are, the more people will try to emulate you and try and oh, I want one of those, I want that success. But that's where you have to have your good lawyers,
Yes.
and you also have to make sure that you have your brand guidelines. And that's the thing is that you have to have your brand guidelines internally so that when you're marketing your own products, that it matches the brand that you've created.
Yes.
And so you have your own brand internal guidelines, and then you have external ones if somebody's going to start licensing your stuff. And then you have to make sure that they follow it, and you have people who are in charge to ensure that they're approving proper stuff or rejecting things that are off brand.
Well, not only has Super Mario, the movie, I think this is the second movie, not only has it, Angry Birds never came close, and as we also read in the story, even the movie Frozen had to let it go at the #1 title in terms of Frozen 2 in terms of the box office takings. So on the one hand, I guess you could say that if you are a creator, on the one hand, if your product, if your design is very simple, the surface of attack, the motivation for copying is less on the one hand, but it's easier to copy. Whereas if you create a whole sophisticated merchandising, narration, brand strategy around it, greater surface of attack, but would it be fair to say harder to copy?
I think so. I'll take it back to books and storytelling because that's what I know. Where when you write a book and it's successful, and you're ready to make your next book, the publisher will always ask for the sequel before they will ask for your brand new book, right? Because they know it's done, right? They know it's sellable, they know it's bankable, so they're always going to ask for the sequel. So what I always tell writers is when you write something, think about how the story can go beyond that story that you've done, right? Think of what the next chapter is, and the next movie, if you will. Because that's what you have to think about these things. You have to think about these things as living, breathing things. So, for example, when I design a video game, the team and we work on the first year of the video game, right? Especially a mobile game, right? We work on the first year. After it's launched, we plan it out, we prep it. But when I build the world for that game, I'm actually building it for 5 years from now. I'm building it for 3 producers from now. Because that's what happens with these video games, right? Is that they're always growing, they're always building, and players are going to want more and more and more. And so when I build the world, if I just stop about the 1 year and I don't think about what's going to happen after that, when I build the world to begin with, then I haven't created the rules of that world yet. And so that's where the disconnect comes in. That's where you start getting things that don't fit within what you've taught the players and built the world. So I think when you build these things, you have to think long term, right? Yes, you have to be realistic. Yes, you have to, like, don't bet the bank on something that, like I always tell people, if you want to hear it's good, just show it to your, if you want to prove that it's good, then show it to people who are actually have an idea of what you're doing, and maybe other people, obviously people you trust, people who can mentor you, people who can help you, and that's where a company like Pitch comes in. Is that you need that guidance, you need that mentorship.
That said, though, Kelly, cast your eye on the story from the BBC website. What seems to be remarkable there in the last paragraph, just above Chris Pratt's face, is the fact that the critics absolutely panned Super Mario Brothers. The crossover from gaming to the movies, according to them, didn't work any better than it did in 1993 with a live-action version. But the audience score and the box office takings were sensational. It sounds like the people who ought to know what they were doing didn't.
Well, I think in this case, the people did know what they're doing, nor were the fans. And who also knew what they were doing were the people who made the movie, because it is very true to the core, the heart of what makes Mario and that brand. There's lots of nods to our various games, like I said earlier, where he's in lots of different, Mario Kart's in there. There's jokes about him being a doctor. There's lots of things that they did right. I don't think the critics, that's not who the target audience is. And that's what we do when we make video games, is we research and figure out who our target audience is, and we build the game towards them. And that's what they did with the Super Mario movie, is they built it towards the fans, and which are billions and billions and billions of them. So I think I'm not surprised it did well. I think,
right.
Yes, the first movie was a failure. It was atrocious. But also I don't think they understood about this cross-platform thing where you can do it right. You can do it like The Last of Us, and you can enjoy the video game, and you can enjoy the TV show. I look at it the same way that the Bourne series did, Jason Bourne, where Jason Bourne, I love the books, but I also love the movies. And anybody who's a fan of Jason Bourne, or even the James Bond, for example, James Bond books are not the same as James Bond movies, but you can still appreciate who the brand is. You can still appreciate the character, and know that they're different versions or different stories that are told in different mediums of that character, and you can still enjoy it.
Well, maybe Elon Musk has it right for a change when he says the critics are disconnected from reality. You would expect them to know the audience as well, too. Final point on this particular story. How important is it to have star power like Chris Pratt doing the voiceover for your animation in order, once again, to raise the barrier to entry to anyone who thinks that they can just anyhow copy what you want to put out?
I think it's less important in an animated movie. Obviously, star power is draw power, right? I mean, obviously, that was proven with, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Bruce Willis back in the day, where you just put their name on a movie, people are going to go to it. I don't know in this day and age if that's, especially with the streaming services and all this other stuff. I think you expect a certain quality. I think that's what you expect when you go, or you expect a certain type of movie. So Keanu Reeves, for example, he's pretty much put himself in the action role, which is great. But I don't know if I would necessarily, he wouldn't be a draw to me for a rom-com anymore and stuff like that, right? So I think it's important to have professionals on your project, and obviously the more famous the professional is, the better. Because it basically gives viability to it and credit to it, that this will be something good.
You can see the QR code on your screen. You've got 20 minutes to submit your questions for Kelly Bender, our special guest from Guangzhou, bringing narratives to brands and games. So ask your question, leave your comment, maybe pick up on something that Kelly, Frank, and I have so far talked about. Contribute to the conversation now by using the QR code on your screen. Frank, your thoughts?
I was just going to ask what your most Same question, but from two sides of it. Working with lawyers, it sounds like you've had to do to step up and address some of the situations in your life. What's the most frustrating experience you've had working with a lawyer, trying to get them to help you? And the flip side of that, what's the most rewarding experience that you've had when you've sought legal help from counsel?
I mean, I don't want to get too personal. I mean, I don't want to talk about my divorce and all that, but I'll say, I mean, that like to me, it wasn't a negative thing on either side, right? But I would say is, I think it's hard when the lawyer doesn't see um, what you're trying to do or the message because it's a message to me when you're suing somebody or dealing with something or just doing legal terms in general, whether it's writing a contract or whatever it is you're conveying a message from you. And I try to not do the message as an aggressive message. Even when bad things were happening to me, I still wanted to come across that not that I want to work things out, but that I want. Um, I think the best way to put it is I want to be me still. And so that's where I just so the working with the lawyers, just making sure that the terminology is aggressive, to make sure that the message is clear. And that's the other thing. I mean, I for my contracts with the teams I work with, the artists and stuff like that, I wanted to make sure that just a regular average day, every person can read that contract and not be confused by it. And so we had to basically, I don't want to say dumb it down, obviously, because it's not who we're working with, but I just want to make sure that if somebody couldn't afford a lawyer, that they could just read it and who completely understand what the terms were. And I'm not sure if legalese is written so that it's almost like a code where you need another lawyer to interpret it. So it just keeps the ball rolling kind of type of thing. But I'm not sure if that's it. But yeah, so I think that's me was the frustrating thing is just being confused by the terminology, the lingo, and it intentionally be confusing. In some of the contracts I've signed. And I've even had my lawyer friend, who, by the way, I pay my lawyer in swag from Comic Cons and the video games I do, because he's a huge fan. But anyway, yeah, like just having him go, like looking at it and saying that's not needed. Like some of the stuff's redundant or some of the stuff is intentionally confusing. Um, Great ways to work with a lawyer is I think honestly, I think it's one of those professions where when you're not hearing anything bad, it's good news, you know? And so I don't know if lawyers get a lot of credit, but they should. The same way that an editor should get a lot of credit, in the fact that they're there to help you. They're a team member that you might not think you need, but you do need them. And they're very valuable and they're there to protect you and they're there to help you. Same thing in editor, when you're working with a book is a lot of people when they start writing, they're scared of editors because they think they're going to steal their work or they think they're going to change their work. And an editor's job is just to make your work better and a lawyer's job is just to protect you.
Yeah, I think sometimes with clients that they feel there's such a cost benefit analysis and there might be a reluctance on their part to seek out lawyers because they perceive that, I'm going to spend more money than I'm going to recover. I want my dignity. I want to stop from being ripped off. I want some self-respect. Is that going to cost me, a couple of $1,000s to get that done? And a lot of times people will turn away from that. And that just contributes to more of a problem because when people don't stand up to themselves, it just encourages the kind of behavior that you described to us earlier.
Exactly, but on that, I would say that comes just down to who you are as a human being, right? If you're going to let somebody take advantage of you in day to day, then you might let them take advantage of you in business, and or if you're the type of person who takes advantage of, if you're a taker in your personality wise, then you're going to keep taking, right? And my philosophy is I'm a giver, and so I'm always helping people, but I have to have my limits, and I have to know, and I have to have the ability to say no and say no. One, I can't help you anymore, or two, I'm done. Like I fulfilled my obligation. And so because the one thing I know is about takers and bad people, they don't have limits, and so they're going to try and take your stuff no matter what. So then what you have to do is protect yourself, especially when you're building an IP, is protect yourself early on. And that's what you have to do. And if you can't afford a lawyer, then when you're writing, what you do initially is the poor man's copyright is you just save a copy of your stuff. But I mean, everything's time dated now anyway. Everything's time stamped with your Google Drive and your phones. And I mean, it helps you a little bit, but and that gives you facts. But I see you shaking your head, Frank. But I mean, without using a lawyer, I don't know how to protect yourself fully.
Well, that's a great segue for PitchMark. I'll tell you a little anecdote about time date stamps. When I was a law student in New York City running around, I had a part-time job servicing papers on litigation parties. And I came back one night and I'd missed the filing date. You know, the building closed 5 minutes before I got there, and I was really despondent. And I had to go back and tell the partner I've missed it. We've missed the deadline. I guess we'll fail the case. And he just looked at me and walked over to his mail meter and he backdated the mailing date, and he ran his private stamp over and he threw it in the mailbox. He said, "No, it's fine. You mailed it 3 days ago." So those time date stamps, they can be easily disproven. But what I wanted to get at, it was PitchMark, really, which is a great service that people like you can do for themselves at a very cost-effective basis before they encounter any problems. PitchMark is a do-it-yourself time date stamp creator that people can generate to protect their creative work. So when they get ready to send it to a comic book publisher or something in response to a request for proposal, they're getting a wrapper around it. And that indicates a signal to the recipient that what is being received is in fact subject to intellectual property rights protection, and that the person sending it to them, the creator, is aware of that, and that they're prepared to take steps to enforce the right if necessary. And it's kind of signaling to everybody involved in the process, wait a minute, before I do something untoward, I better think twice. Now, PitchMark is something that we make available free to innovators and creators such as yourself. And, you know, deterrence, Mark had said earlier that it's really unlikely to stop somebody from stealing your car. But as they're casing the joint, if they see you've got a low jack on the steering wheel or something, it's going to take them a little bit longer. They're going to think twice. They're going to go on to the next car. Same thing with PitchMark. If a publisher receives 4 requests for proposals on innovative ideas for a jingle or a new comic book idea, and one of them has the PitchMark certificate around it, that's going to send a signal and a message to that recipient that, okay, this guy knows what he's doing and this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's prepared to take the next step if necessary.
Yeah, spot on.
I have a question about that. Sorry, I don't know it very well. How does PitchMark know that it's an original idea?
Yeah, very valid question. And Frank, I'm sure you have the answer.
The question, I'm sorry, I'm a little compromised.
The question is, how do we know it's original? And you're right, Kelly. We never look at anybody's ideas. But that's precisely why you need to PitchMark your idea as soon as you have it, so that you don't go telling a bunch of people who then go and PitchMark the idea as their own. You want to make sure that your date stamp is the oldest, and that's why we use it ourselves.
I think his question might be, though, what if a bad guy wakes up in the morning and decides to put a PitchMark around Mickey Mouse and hold it out to the world as his own?
Yeah, good luck to you. Once again, PitchMark never looks at people's ideas, ever. We, in fact, don't want to know. I'd much prefer that people, that innovators actually password protect their file even before they upload it, as an extra measure of security, and then communicate the password to the receiving party.
I was just going to fill in, PitchMark isn't yet accepted by any courts as a dispositive proof of any sort of a fact that's alleged in it. It really is just an indicator. And people only know to generate it when they're concerned about protecting themselves. So, you know, what stops a bad guy from waking up one day and saying, okay, I'm going to hold myself out to the world as the creator of Winnie the Pooh or something and put a PitchMark around it? Yeah, I guess they could try to do that. And Mark's right. We wouldn't ordinarily catch that, but I'll blow up in their face before they know it.
That's entirely fine. Because Kelly, the issue that I'm sure you've faced over the many years that you've been in the gaming business, the writing business, you were a freelance writer, as you said earlier, you wrote children's books. The gray areas are just so vast that, look at patent applications and how long it takes them just to figure out whether a patent is in fact unique, whether an application should in fact be granted. But in the last 10, 15 minutes that we have, I do want to also pay homage to the questions that we've got coming in. Once again, this is the QR code for you to submit your questions for our special guest, Kelly Bender. today. Here's one question that's come in. Not entirely sure what you mean. You wrote, why not discuss agents? Kelly, do you use an agent?
I actually don't. I haven't honestly been that big enough to need an agent. So a lot of the stuff I've done, especially early on in my career, was just self-driven. It was just me promoting myself, me marketing myself, marketing the books, tracking down publishers, all that other stuff. So I haven't had to do an agent. And then in the video game industry, I don't either. It just goes from company to company. But yeah, I definitely I'm certain like if you're an actor, definitely you should have an agent, a voiceover actor, model. I definitely would like if my career got to the point where like the people are wanting to license my stuff, then yes, I definitely would use an agent. As obviously as well as a lawyer. I just haven't got to that point yet where I just work for major video game companies now and then just doing my own private stuff on my side.
Frank, in your experience,
that's really relevant though, because as you do talk about sustainability and building brands and stories and sequels and whatnot, that's where agents really do provide a benefit. Agents, of course, are representatives for the commercial careers of the authors, and they're the ones who are really savvy about which publishers are looking for what. And I think perhaps that question was that a lot of times agents are going to be able to see some of these issues before you have to get to a lawyer. They deal with this stuff every day, and they typically make money from the remuneration that flows back to the author. So it's not money out of your pocket per se. And oftentimes agents can be a great line of first defense against anything bad happening.
In your experience, Frank, do they know what they're doing? Are they a risk themselves to take
good
your
ones
idea?
do. Good ones do. It's just like lawyers, that there's nothing. You can just wake up and poof, you're an agent. There's no special requirements. There's not, unlike a lawyer, there's not a bar exam or anything, but there are some good ones, really good ones. And this is how, the likes of J.K. Rowling, these tremendously successful literary franchises that exist. These are all really driven by publishers and agents.
Next question, though. Let me show you this one first. Thing that you're talking about, the good ones do. Well, what about the bad ones? Thank you for submitting this one. You wrote, not all lawyers understand the deal-making process in the arts or has the leverage or experience to have the best boilerplates with publishers. Frank?
I agree 100%. That's
the
mark of an entertainment attorney. They're typically the ones who spend day in, day out in these circles, understanding the business concerns and knowing the players. Book publishing in New York City is so much a situation of people knowing each other. People that get together, agents that meet with editors every day, and just understand the business. And it's, as I say, it's a small field. So when you're in that small circle and you're breathing that rare air, the likelihood of bad things happening is reduced a lot. And no,
Kelly, any experience
pick a lawyer
with
off the street just because they're a lawyer doesn't mean they know anything about the entertainment industry.
Kelly, any experience with entertainment lawyers or specialist lawyers like your dear friend?
No, like I said, I've been very fortunate. So yeah, my lawyer's friend, he's actually a divorce lawyer. And I actually didn't even use him when I did my divorce. Because he's in Canada, I was in Singapore. So, but anyway, yeah, no, I definitely, I do think that you should, if you're, use a specialist. The laws are different and you can't expect every lawyer to know every law. Yeah, you use specialized lawyers.
Great. Once again, the QR code is on your screen. Submit your questions now. Final call. We are wrapping on time in 10 minutes from now. Another question, Frank, I think this one might be a little bit more for you. Could you please suggest, I filed, I think that says, and received a trademark in India, Ireland in 2020, 2021, but I need to do a trademark in the US. And sadly, the US patent website was down while filing the trademark on the last page. Apart from trying again, Frank, what else?
I was going to say try again. It just sounds like an old-fashioned computer glitch. I hope this isn't because the politics back home haven't shut down the government again or something like this. I actually did go to a meeting at the Copyright Office once, and I was not allowed in because it was during a government shutdown.
Right.
Incredible, but that doesn't sound like anything intentional. I'm just a little bit
Okay.
to the trademark and sadly the U.S. Patent. Yeah, it's the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office that one uses in the United States, and they do have a strong preference for electronic filing. So I've got to think
Right.
that was just a bad day for them. It's not how they do business.
Right. Yes, and you couldn't just dial back the time dial on your stamp, and all of a sudden
No,
the
I mean,
government would reopen. Right?
you can submit your applications on paper. They just charge more these days, believe it or not, to look at a piece of paper than they do to look at an online application, and it's a slower process.
But can I also recommend PitchMark does not replace trademarks. If you can trademark your creative design, maybe it's a logo or a slogan of some sort, by all means go for the trademark. But in the meantime, PitchMark it first. It's free. Frank, you have a fan. Actually, you have many. Here's one. Frank's right. You say literary agents of repute know a lot more about what deal points they can get. They help see your long-term career, fight for separation of rights, and don't cost upfront money. Frank, any final comments?
Yeah, my first job was as a contracts manager with the Macmillan Publishing Company, and I had a long author-publisher agreement that I had to defend because the company wanted to acquire all rights they possibly could in every manner for any possible thing. I also did subsidiary rights contracts where we allowed magazines and reprint publishers to take our literary properties and use them themselves. Entertainment negotiation is always a function of clout. The contracts can look really, really frightening. A lot of what's in there just isn't worth fighting for. And again,
Right.
this is precisely what literary agents did. It was so much more easy, beneficial to negotiate a contract with a literary agent than with the author's father, who happens to be a real estate lawyer and is making his way for the first time through a 35-page contract. And the warranties and representations paragraphs are 400 words long anyway. So
Right.
yeah, spot on. Literary agents in the world I've dealt with and used to deal with were worth their weight in gold.
Kelly, I can't let you go without delving deeper into your storytelling prowess, because many of our viewers do have to tell brand stories, either in text or in graphic design. Can you get us up to speed on the latest thinking of storytelling, and perhaps also give the counterexample of what do you see brands currently doing wrong when it comes to their storytelling?
Well, the first thing brands don't do that make mistakes on it. They don't define what their brand is. They don't set up their own brand guidelines, and they don't follow them. And like I said, that should be done internally. Whether it's a color template, whether it's just the type of language you're going to use. And that's very, very important. So that's the number one thing is you have to set up what your brand guidelines are, and you have to follow them. And then when you start going out there, you have to ensure that other people follow it as well. So that's very important. And then I think that's the most important thing is think about your brand as its own entity and build around that.
That sounds fairly fundamental. And wow, they don't even stick to their own brand guidelines. That's again sounds like an easy win. Kelly?
So that wasn't. I wasn't sure if that was for Frank or for me.
No, it's for you. I mean,
it's true. But
go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying it's true. It's so to give you an example in the video game industry is that the production team builds the game. So we have a brand guideline, we have our world bible, we have our characters, we have our character designs, and then you have the marketing team, which is another entity within the company. And in some companies, there's no communications between those two. And also for example, a marketing team's job is to get downloads. Well, a production's job is to get downloads, but we also want retention. And what that means is retention is we want people to download the game and stay. Well, in order to do that, we have to tell the right message, and we have to tell what the right marketing thing is to promote our game. But then unfortunately, in video game industry, especially mobile games, there's a huge trend right now of using fake ads to sell your games. And so what it's doing is it's getting a lot of buzz, it's getting a lot of downloads, but unfortunately, it's not getting retention. And but that being said, marketing's doing their job because they're getting the downloads, but over here we have the needs of retention, and that's where it gets hard because everybody has their own KPIs, everybody has their own things they have to answer to, and atone to. So that's where it gets tough. So getting on the same page, obviously, is the first rule of thumb. Is the same way. If you're in a band, everybody's playing the same song. We're all looking at the same song sheet, and that's very important as well.
So can you pinpoint, perhaps even in granular detail, what is the nugget of success unique to games where you see an opportunity for brands to take on?
I don't think it's this thing that's just straight unique for games. I think as long as you have a unique idea and a unique story to tell or a song, I think just having a unique, unicorn idea is important. But the biggest thing is be prepared to listen to that idea, to build that, to grow that, to fester it, and then from there take your next steps to get it out in the world.
Do you find that there is enough cross-pollination between brand marketers and gamers?
I think that's where it's difficult. I think that's a case-by-case situation where a good brand knows their audience, and a good brand knows how to sell and promote their game.
We're kind of seemingly listening in on somebody else's conversation on your end, Kelly.
No, it's not me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anyway, carry on. So you were saying that that brand marketers and storytellers would do well to intermingle a bit more, I gather.
Of course, it's the same way that it all comes down to your brand Bible and what your thing is, right? You should know exactly what it is you're trying to tell, who your audience is, and then you should cater towards promoting and marketing towards that audience. And then what happens is that once you get your target audience, they're happy with it. They're going to stay. The word of mouth is going to spread. The social media is going to spread, and then that's when you start getting fans who weren't your target audience, but now you have new fans, and you grow and it just builds and snowballs. But the biggest thing is you have to understand what your brand is. You have to understand who you're making. You have an idea. If you're making an idea for a toy, then who's it for? What's it going to be used for? And then you make it towards that person, right? The same way if you have a song, like what type of song is it? What genre is it? Then you're making it towards that audience. The same with you're writing a book. What genre is it? Is it fantasy, sci-fi, horror? Then that's your target audience. But then that being said, people who aren't your original target audience might be drawn to your thing if enough people recommend it, if they hear enough stuff about it, which brings you back to your marketing as well.
And I know Frank wants to ask you this question. What can lawyers learn from selling their services from the way that you help games be sold through narratives?
I think it's just you have to listen to your client, right? You have to know what it is they're trying to do. You have to know what their long-term goal is. So you have to have short-term goal, you have to have medium-term goals, and you have to have long-term goals. And if you want to be the next, George R. R. Martin and write a novel and becomes, like video games and TV shows and everything else, then you have to tell the people on your team that, whether it's your lawyer, whether it's your agent, you have to let them know where you want to go, and they're going to help you get there.
Sorry to steal your thunder on that one, Frank. You're on mute, sir.
Quite all right. I would agree that life is a long run. It's not a sprint. And it does behoove lawyers to get in touch with their clients and understand what they need. Long-term relationship is the best one.
Indeed. We also welcome lawyers here at PitchMark. You can sign up if you're legal counsel and you think you have what it takes to service our community of innovators. Go to pitchmark.net and click on lawyers. If you are an innovator and this is the first time you've heard of PitchMark, you can register for free. Once again, pitchmark.net. We will return with more IP clinics. And in the meantime, Kelly Bender, thank you very much for your being with us today here on the IP clinic. It's been great to have you with us, and all the best to you in Guangzhou.
Thank you very much, Mark, and Frank, and thanks for having me. It's been great talking to you.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much, Kelly Bender and Frank Rittman in Bangkok. I'm Mark Laudi here in Singapore. See you next time.